handouts, there really aren't any. I have a few screenshots as a leave behind, which I can give you after the presentation as a visual reminder of what we go over. But the slides are in your product. So if you hit today's What's New, when you log into MediRegs, you'll see the upcoming registration list for educational webinars. And in the area where you signed up for today, the handouts are there as well. And then the last piece of housekeeping, just to save questions, because this is a product demonstration, not an educational session, there aren't any CEUs associated with attending today. The point is really to make sure that MediReg subscribers understand what you already have in your subscription so that you're prepared for go live date in a couple of weeks. So during this session, we're going to talk about the ICD-10 CM and PCS codebooks. And I'd like to show you and ask for some feedback from you if you're interested in a new feature we're considering in the ICD-10 CM book. We're also going to use the ICD-10 Explorer to dual code and look at how GEMS mapping works in that tool. I'd like to spend a little bit of time showing you how to access ICD-10 resources that aren't just the code book and the code tool, but other regulatory issuances and advice from the American Hospital Association. And then we'll spend some time looking at local and national coverage determinations and how they're different under ICD-10. And then we'll end with just a reminder of how to set up your product so that you're on top of ICD-10 changes, because we do expect there to be an awful lot of updates coming out. But before I go into the product, I'm just going to flip through a couple of quick slides just to give you these visual cues. And again, I'm happy to share these slides afterwards. There'll be a second session of this class on September 15th, a little bit of overlap and some new. That one will focus more on payment. So we'll take a look at the MSDRG grouper and calculator in that presentation. Now in July, CMS and the American Medical Association did some joint press releases and announcements that CMS was going to, quote, relax audits and edits under ICD-10 starting October 1st and for an entire year to reduce the burden on providers where there's a concern of not enough specificity and a lot of denials were expected. So there was an announcement on July 6th, but there have also been subsequent clarifications published, and I would encourage you to take a careful look at those. When we get into talking about the local coverage determinations, I'm going to be referencing this. You will still need to put valid ICD-10 codes on your claims in order to properly get paid. But what they've relaxed is that as long as you're in the right family of codes, if you have the right versus the left versus the unspecified, you will still get paid unless there's an LCD that's more specific. And we can talk about that a little bit more. There's one other resource I'd like to just offer, and I'll show you it in the product, but I just, again, want to indicate it to you on the slides. So in your MediRegs product, depending on which level you subscribe to, I'm going to be showing you a whole series of tools, but you want to focus on your left-hand navigation pane, and I'll show you this in a minute. Watch your alerts, find the code books, coding guidance library, the ICD Explorer, the local coverage determinations. And then finally, I'll be referencing this, so I just want to show you a slide. The national coverage determinations have not traditionally contained any codes. So there were no CPT codes, there were no ICD-9 codes. But CMS has begun to issue coding guidelines for the national coverage determinations in a series of transmittals, which I have listed here. And those transmittals have PDF or Excel attachments. When you open those files up, you'll see CMS actually providing pretty decent guidance regarding which procedure codes and which diagnosis codes meet the burden for medical necessity for that specific national coverage determination. And they're buried in the transmittals, not in the most obvious place because they're not published as part of the NCD at this point in time. And so I just thought I would point that out to folks. Okay, I'm going to switch screens now. And everyone should be able to see my Audit and Revenue Resource Center screen. Mary, can you see that? Okay, so first we're going to go into ICD-10 coding. Great. And over on the left-hand side of your product, I'm going to be showing the Audit and Revenue Resource Center because I do want to reference the coding clinics and the coding handbook from the American Hospital Association, those titles are available in our top-tiered products. If you don't have the Audit and Revenue Resource Center, you still have a Code Books and Guidance left-hand navigation pane. And under there, you'll see the ICD-10 CM and the ICD-10 PCS books. You'll also see the Guidance for Coders library. And if you click on that, you'll notice that there is a lot of very interesting and useful information in that library, including CMS's publications related to ICD-10 and copies of the ICD-10 code books down here. Now, what you'll notice right before the turn of the year, this happens in October for ICD-10, it happens in December for CPT and HCPCS, we pre-release next year's book so that you can start to use it, but we keep the current book current. So I have here the pre-release for 2016 and the current cookbook for 2015. Really, they're the same this year because the diagnosis code descriptions didn't actually change. So now let's spend some time in the ICD-10 ebook. AHIMA recommends that you don't get encoder dependent and just think of ICD-10 as a search. You really want to understand how to natively code in ICD-10, and that involves really understanding the ecosystem of how the book is set up. So we've got this book set up for you in chapter structure, and a chapter will be denoted with a yellow folder that you can open and close. It's recommended that you read the table of contents, the ICD-10 coding guidelines, once a year. So now would be a good time to come in and just read the conventions and general coding guidelines and chapter-specific guidelines. If you fail to read them, it's okay, because when you search in this book, you'll accidentally find referenced sections. Then there's the tabular section, and if you're familiar with ICD-9, the chapter format of ICD-10 is actually quite similar. The code numbers are different, but it's essentially a list of chapters based on diseases in the body systems with external causes, factors, and injuries down near the bottom. Now you can navigate this book a number of ways. You can click on the chapter, or you can click on the yellow folder. If you click on the yellow folder, you expand the entire contents of that chapter. And what we've done in ICD-10, because there are so many codes, we made a page for each family or category. And a family or category is designated by those first three codes. If you were to click, instead of on the chapter folder, if you click on the chapter link, what you'll get to is essentially the index page for that chapter, and it includes the instructions that apply to all codes in that chapter. So this set of instructions applies to any code that starts with an H. In there you'll see an index that breaks that chapter down into sections, and when you click on that, again, you'll be taken to an index page. You'll see the categories in there, and then you can click into the actual category page. Now, I'd like to point out some of the features that you'll see on our pages. The pages are different for each code, but the layout is similar. So once you get familiar with one page, you'll really be able to understand how to navigate most of the pages. So if there are chapter or section instructions, like I showed you for Chapter 7, there'll be a little note up here, and if you push the plus sign, you'll extend that out. So that actually saves you flipping back in the book to find the guidelines for this particular chapter. In this case, there's no section notes because there's a little plus sign here, and I can double check that by clicking and noticing that there's no notes there, but sometimes you will see those notes. Next, you're going to see the category, and that will be bolded and in the largest font on the screen. And then under that, you'll see all the subcategorizations. We use the indenting, or what people like to call tabular presentation, so that you understand here's the 3, 4, 5, and 6-digit specificity. The bolded codes are the reportable valid codes. So when CMS is asking us to make sure that we put a valid code on a claim, this H31.00 will not get paid, but H31.001 will. And what we're hearing is as long as you're in the right family, even though it's the unspecified code, you're going to have relaxed edits as well. So there's also little instructions like includes and excludes notes. And in the guidelines, those are all described. There's two kinds of includes notes, and they're a little different this year than they were in the past. So you want to read that and make sure you understand it. Now I want to show you a very long category of codes. In the injury section of the book, the fracture codes are quite long. So here you'll again see there's my chapter instructions and my section instructions. One of my team probably should mute their computer or laptop because I can hear an echo. I don't know if anybody else is hearing that. Right here you see the instructions for all codes that start with an S12, and then you see the 7th character specificity. Those may be different for different families. We see ADS for initial, subsequent, and sequela, but then we see much more complex 7th character specificity in the fracture codes. So as you're working your way down the book, if you look in your paper book, typically you'll see the 6 characters and a note to not forget the 7th character, but we've gone ahead and blown out all the way to the 7th character and provided you with the full long description right on screen so that there's no mystery or question. Now you also have access in the code book to all the indices, so the diseases, the external causes of injury, the drugs, and the neoplasm tables are part of the book, as well as some additional chapters and indexes we've added that were provided by Medicare just to provide clarification. I'm going to run a couple of examples in the code book just so that you can see what searching looks like. If you want to just search on the category, you can absolutely do that. And what you'll see is that you'll find that category page, but you'll also see references in the indexes and some of those other sections and chapters. You can search for the full reportable code, with or without the decimal place. And again, you'll find that hit, and you'll come into the book. Since this is a very long page, you'll notice the first match button appear. And if you jump down the screen, the actual code that you just searched on will be highlighted for you. Now, sometimes we would prefer to code off of the index. So you can keyword search. If the term that you're searching on appears in the index, you will find hits on the category pages, in the tabular section, as well as the actual index. And again, the index is a very long page. So if you click on the first match button, it's going to jump you down to that tabular presentation in the index with all of that additional instruction. You can choose the code that seems appropriate, and there are hyperlinks directly into the book from there. So that's a quick overview of the ICD-10 CM electronic code book. I would like to just show you an enhancement that we're thinking about for 2016. So we put it in the pre-release book. And we would love to have some customers get back to us and let us know if this is an interesting enhancement or if you think that it was actually going to cause you trouble. So what we noticed when we went to those pages like that injury code is that the pages are very, very long. So we have experimented with putting in expanding and collapsing functionality here so that when I land in the S02 category, all the 4th digit specificity is collapsed. And maybe I decide that I really want to look up fracture of the orbital floor so I can expand, and then I'll see the specificity under there. Now, if you have searched to get into one of these chapters, one of these category pages, that's going to cause an interesting little extra step. So here's an example where S12.4 has 5th digit specificity, and then 6th digit specificity, and then 7th digit specificity. So you'd have to do 4 clicks to get all the way to where you think you want to go. And so let me show you how that would look for a search. So it's certainly an interesting browse experience, but we're interested in hearing if it's going to irritate you for search. So when I click into S12, and I'm looking for 4.430A, and I click on this first match button, the information is not expanded, so it can't find that page on the screen. If I click Expand All, the first match button works. So would it be helpful for you to have these plus-minus signs and the ability to expand and collapse bits of the tree? Or would that just be needless extra work for you? And I'd love feedback from anybody who cares. And you have my contact information, and I'll also be sending you a thank you after our presentation today, so you can let me know there. We're going to spend a lot more time on PCS next time, but I do just want to show you the PCS book, and it has the guidelines. It also has the reference manual, and it has these tables So the procedure coding system works with needing to start with a root operation, such as change, destruction, extraction, a body system, such as central nervous system, lower arteries, lymphatic and hemic systems, and then you need to build a 7-character code. So any code in this family would start with a 07L, and then you would choose the body part, and then you would choose the approach, and then you would choose the device, and then you would choose the qualifier, and that would construct a 7-character code. We have enhanced the book by adding the actual reportable codes at the bottom of the screen with the full descriptors. And the reason why I find this helpful is for keyword searching. So let's search for destruction of whatever that body part is. When you keyword search, I put the body part in quotes, it's going to jump you very quickly to the right page. And ManyRegs' highlighting that comes automatically when you search will highlight your search terms, and I find it makes it a little bit easier to visualize what the reportable code might be. So I can see I'm a 075D, and then I can keep going to pick 034 or ZZ. So those are the two books, and they're available on the left-hand navigation pane under Codebooks and Guidance. They're also in the Guidance for Coders and Codebooks libraries if you need them there. And right now, these links will take you to the 2015 version, and on October 1st, we'll roll that over to the 2016 version. Okay, so that's the code book, and it is important for us to understand how to natively code and understand the ecosystem of the book. But for productivity coding, it might actually be easier for you to use a search tool. And so we have an ICD-10 Explorer tool. It's available on your left-hand navigation pane under Lookup and Payment Tools. Now, this tool gives you many options. You can keyword search, you can code search, and it has the ICD-9 and the ICD-10 diagnosis and procedure codes loaded. So depending on what you've searched for, you might get slightly different results. So let's just start with the most common scenario. You have a clinical term that you're looking for diagnosis coding. So if I'm just going to put in CKD, click on the search button, and my results will appear on the bottom. ICD Explorer is set up for dual coding, so your left-hand side will be your ICD-9 results, and your right-hand results will be from ICD-10. The ICD-9 results are almost always shorter for two reasons. The first reason is we didn't put all the guidelines on the page, but for ICD-10, since it's new, we did. And the second reason is very often there's just more ICD-10 codes because of the specificity. The ICD-10 side looks very similar to the code book, so you want to stay focused on finding the bolded reportable code, and those little indicators are there as well. From here, you may want more information, so let's explore a couple of the links that are available to you. On the ICD-9 side, the ICD-9 codes have always been terrible search terms, because what's 585? That also could be many, many other things. It could be a section of a chapter, could be a CFR citation. It's been a very tricky search term. I-10 will be a much better search term for us. So what we've done here on the I-9 side is just giving you access to the ICD-9 code book, where you can see the chapter guidelines, the section notes, and the coding instructions for the ICD-9 code. On the ICD-10 side, we've provided you with 3 links. So it's going to be at the category or family level. So you're not going to search individual specific codes, you're going to search at the top. So if you click on the codebook link, that will take you into the ICD-10 book that I just taught you about. There are your chapter instructions, your section instructions, and there you can see all the codes on the page, which may give you better results than your search did. You can also search for local coverage determinations directly from here, just like in the Advanced Code Explorer tool. So when you click on the LCD link, it's going to run a keyword search of all the local coverage determinations for that family. So it searched for N18.star, so that's any code that starts with an N18. And I want to mention something about tailoring your page here. I happen to have my product set up to reflect a number of different payers across the country. You probably should have your product set up to just look at the local coverage determinations in the state that you prefer. And I'm just going to jump to a new screen so that I can show you that. I'm going to leave this screen open, and I'm going to open another screen in a new tab. On your Welcome tab, you've always had this ability to tailor your page, but many customers haven't found that feature. When you click on Tailor Your Page, you can add and remove content to your product scope, and it's there that you would want to set the specificity for your state. So I've got 6 states turned on, but you can turn on 2 or 1, and then when you do that, that's going to dictate the results that you see when you either go to this search box on the left-hand side, or when you click on the LCD link from Code Explorer Advanced or ICD Explorer. So let's investigate what we're seeing here. I'm going to go over the local coverage determinations really thoroughly, but I just want to reveal to you that, let's say CGS is my payer, and I'm seeing here is a local coverage determination that's effective in 3 weeks, and it contained N18 codes, which is why I found this in my search results. It may not be the only active LCD. This might be a common diagnosis that shows up on a number of coverage determinations, so make sure you scroll. And we'll talk a little bit more about the LCDs in a few minutes. The other opportunity when you're in the ICD-10 Explorer and you found ICD-10 code results, you can click on the code book, the LCDs, and you can also search that guidance library that I showed you in the beginning. And that's going to find you just a nice treasure trove of information that's come out from Medicare, if you have the top-tiered product, the American Hospital Association, if you have the mid-tiered product, the American Medical Association, so special instructions. It will also search the code book. So you'll find that code in the code book again, but then you also might find some additional information. I'm just going to expand a couple of these so that we can see what we're seeing. Here are some national coverage determination coding guidelines that contain that ICD-9 code. That's interesting. Here are some American Hospital Association coding handbook sections that contain references to chronic kidney disease or code N18. You have access to that entire book. You might have thought of that as the Faye Brown book. Faye Brown is no longer with us. Nellie Leon Chissen has written the new version for ICD-10. This is an excellent book, very good for education. It has outstanding exercises to practice. And I'm finding as I'm doing research, when I find a hit in there, there might be a really nice explanation of some esoterica that she's got in here that's quite useful. I'm also seeing Medicare benefit policy and claims processing information. So any place where there's a page in the guidance library that actually names that code, you're going to find it when you're searching from the ICD Explorer tool. I'm going to show you a couple other example searches in the ICD-10 Explorer tool. I want to start with another keyword search. And I'm not going to put quotes around it. I'm not sure if I have the words in the right order. So I'm just going to put all 3 words, and it's going to find me any codes that have all 3 words in the description. So like I said before, my I-9 codes are on the left, my I-10 codes are on the right. Now, under I-9, we simply needed to code for central corneal ulcer. Under I-10, we need to specify right, left, bilateral, or unspecified. So there's 4 codes where there used to be 1. Now I want to show you that this tool also has a mapping capability. If I want to confirm for myself that 370.03 seems to be equivalent to the H16.01 series, I can click on the little green button. By default, we're going to search all 3 maps, so it's like these are automatically checked on for you. But if you want to reduce your search, you can limit it to any one of those. For now, I'm going to keep them all. And I'm going to click on the little green button. And this is accessing the CMS GEMS maps. There are 3 maps. The backwards, where they started with all the ICD-10 codes and went and found a generally equivalent I-9 code. The forward, where they started with a list of I-9 codes and went and found a generally equivalent I-10 code. And then the reimbursement map. They don't always match, as in this case. And this is one good example why we should be natively coding in ICD-10, not blindly trusting GEMS. Because if you have a payer or a coding tool that's just mapping, using this map, you would miss some of the specificity that was available to you. Certainly H16.019 is a good code, but 0.11, 2, or 3 is a better code. And so we don't want to blindly trust the GEMS maps. Now, also, once I've done this, I notice that I might want to go into the book. So let me hit the browser back button. These links only appear when you've done a search, not when you've done a map. But let's go into the code book for H16 and notice that there's actually a number of different types of corneal ulcers, which didn't show up in my search because I had typed the word central, so it only showed me H16.01. Yet maybe it's a ring corneal ulcer, and I didn't know that. And so I like to go back and forth between the Explorer tool and the code book to make sure that I'm getting the depth right and not just blindly trusting that the words I put in the box are the best words available. And I'd like to give you an example for that. I'm going to do a procedure search. So here's colonoscopy, and on the inpatient side, we've been coding that as a 45.23 for decades. And I notice on the right, there's an encounter code for the colonoscopy, but there's no procedure code. And that's because under PCS, we're not using those vernacular concepts like arthroplasty, colonoscopy. We need to remember and use the root operations. And I don't remember what root operation the colonoscopy is, so I'm going to cheat. And I'm going to click on the little green button, and that's going to map me to inspection of the lower intestinal tract. But because I don't trust GEMS, I'm not going to stop there. I would either now search for 0DJ to get that entire family of codes. That's an O. Let's make sure that's a 0. Or I can actually just copy the keywords off the screen. And now, instead of using my ICD-9 vocabulary, which was colonoscopy, I'm going to use my ICD-10 words, which is inspection, and then that's going to do a keyword search. It will reveal the ICD-10 codes, but probably not the ICD-9 codes, because that's not the language that we used. And my screen is just frozen, so I apologize for that. Let me give this a second to catch up. I think I'm having an internet connectivity problem. I apologize for that. But that would be the workflow that I would suggest you follow. Map, because it's a good cheat, but then keyword search, either in ICD-10 Explorer or by actually going to the PCS book and find that code directly on your own. So let me demonstrate that going to the book. What you've noticed me do in this demonstration is I've got several MediRegs windows open at the same time, and you're welcome to do that. I find that very helpful instead of toggling back and forth. And I want to put lower intestinal tract in quotes just so that I don't find quite so many search results. So there's my search in the book. There's my 0DJ codes. And there's that nice highlighting that makes it much easier for me to figure out where I'm going. Okay, there. Let's see if it's loading. I'm going to pause for a second and see if anyone has typed any questions in the QA panel that feel like something I could demonstrate right now before I proceed on to the other sections of my conversation.
There are no questions at this time, Rayl.
Okay, perfect. So we've talked about using the ICD-10 books. I showed you the new expand collapse functionality in the 2016 pre-release book, and I'd love to have you give me feedback on that. And we talked about natively coding in the ICD Explorer tool and accessing the GEMS maps. Next, I'd like to talk about the local and national coverage determinations and take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of those regulatory issuances that come out from Medicare and the American Hospital Association related to ICD-10. There, my PCS search has succeeded now while I was gabbing over there. So there I searched for the inspection of the lower intestinal tract. Remember when we mapped the colonoscopy code, it only went to 10DJ code? But I can see just because of the structure of the way PCS is set up, they always give you all the approaches. And so I see a larger, more rich list of codes when I keyword search on my own, and I also find going into the code book from here quite useful. Okay. So let's focus over on the left-hand side on the local coverage determinations. Everyone has, under special searches, a link to LCDs and NCDs. If you have the coding suite, you also have a coverage tab, which is exactly the same. And there's a giant red note at the top that reminds you to tailor your page. And I already explained why you would want to do that. If you tailor your page, then your searches are not going to return so many hits. We've provided a library for each of the 50 states, and I'm just going to menu walk into one of them so that I can orient you to the way the local and national coverage determinations are set up, so that when you're keyword searching, what you're seeing on screen will make sense to you. So in every state, we did go ahead and put the national coverage determinations in the state library so that if you're searching and there's an NCD, you'll find it. Then you'll notice that we have local coverage determinations for the Medicare Administrative Contractors, Part A, B, and HH, and then also the coverage articles. We also capture the bulletins from the Medicare Administrative Contractor sites. Those are typically like newsletters or e-bulletins. The LCDs are all set up in a very similar way, so if I just show you what's going on in Part A, Novitas, in jurisdiction JH, which is Louisiana, you can extrapolate this to your geographic region. There are three types of LCDs, the ones that are active right now, the drafts, and the archives. At the top of every local coverage determination data set, there's an index. This index is automatically updated every single week. There's a date right here. If this date looks old, it's not because MediRegs didn't do our job. I promise we download the whole database every week. It means that the payer hasn't put anything new in the past week. Now this table will appear in your daily email alert, probably on Saturday, maybe on Friday, when we do those weekly updates. This is handy because you can sort on effective date, revision effective date, title, or even the number of the LCD. Now I noticed as I was sorting, some content appeared in yellow. This week, when we updated this set of LCDs, the yellow highlighted rows had LCDs with changes, new version numbers probably. Now why are there two copies of every single local coverage determination? That's because the MACs have issued a whole new local coverage determination under ICD-10. So there's one for I-9, and then there's one for I-10. And the I-9 one will just sort of magically turn into an archive on October 1st, or maybe about a week therein. And then we'll pick it up and move it into the archived section of this data set. But for now, there's a double of everything. And the real quick way to know whether you're looking at the I-10 or the I-9 policy is the effective date. So if it's not until October, that's the ICD-10 policy. And if you have found searching the local coverage determinations frustrating right now, it's because you're paying attention. This allergen immunotherapy policy has been updated 10 times and it's not even active yet. And that's just the way it is. So let's go into a local coverage determination and take a look around. They're structured identically, whether they're 9s or 10s. The only difference is there's one section that says ICD-9 codes that support medical necessity, and the new ones say ICD-10 codes. But there are actually 4 sections of a local coverage determination that I think are important for you to understand. The first section is up here. It says CMS National Coverage Policy. When you get to this section, there might be a big table that talks about how we're not really sure who the MAC is because everybody's fighting. You can ignore that. And then there's a section, usually 4 or 5 references to the Social Security Act. You can ignore those sections. But underneath that, there are very often excellent citations to 3 of the key Medicare manuals: the Benefit Policy Manual, the National Coverage Determination Manual, and the Claims Processing Manual. And there can be very useful benefit policy, frequency, claims instructions in those references that may not be written in the local coverage determination. It's very helpful that this payer has taken the time to spell this out to us. So I can see here that in the Benefit Policy Manual, Chapter 15, Section 20, we have some information about allergy treatment. So I'm going to show you how I would menu walk to go find that reference. I'm going to leave the local coverage determination open. I'm going to open MediRegs in a whole new window, another tab, and then I'm just going to go to the manuals, to the benefit policy. It was Chapter 15, Section 20. So I'm going to walk down into Chapter 15. I'm going to go into Section 20, and I'm going to notice that there was that section, which was 20.2, about allergy treatment. This is an important piece of information for me to have. It may not be discussed in the local coverage determination, and it's actually pretty hard to find if you were just keyword searching on your allergy code or on your diagnosis code. So these references can be extremely helpful. They're also really helpful when your payer doesn't have a policy, which can be common, and then you want to see if there's any national advice. You can go look on your own, or you can cheat and use somebody else's local coverage determination. So these citations, I think, are a very important and useful section. The next section is this plain English description of the indications and limitations of coverage and/or medical necessity. This section can be quite long. It might include instructions for what the clinician needs to document. It might include research about why this is or is not a service that's considered reasonably necessary, and it might have some limitations. When we get audited, this is what we need to comply with. There may be edits in your claims processing system to catch obvious medical necessity problems, but when you get audited, you actually have to be doing what it says here. Also, if you're having any trouble with your doctors documenting things properly, handing them a list of codes is probably not going to cause any greater compliance. This section was written by a medical director for medical professionals. And so this is a very useful training tool if you're trying to improve documentation across your organization. So that's the second section in the local coverage determination that I think is quite helpful. Then there is the coding section, where we actually get to see a little bit of the insides of the medical necessity scrubbing that happens on this payer's edit system. So we might see bill types, revenue codes, CPT and HCPCS codes. I do just want to point out that the CPT codes are links. So if you click on that, that will take you into the CPT procedure code book. And just like the ICD-10 book, it's got all your chapter and section instructions and lots of other good stuff there. Then you're going to see your list of codes that support medical necessity. And this is you understanding the medical necessity edits in your claims processing system. Now, these sections are here as a courtesy to you as the provider and to the payers. They do not have to fill this section out. So you might notice in the local coverage determination, and when you get down here, it says, use codes that match what we set up above. And then you have to deduce the coding on your own, which is why you shouldn't blindly trust your medical necessity edits. The last part of the local coverage determination that I really like is all the way at the bottom, and it's called the revision history section. And when I see an LCD in my What's New, this is the first place I stop. I jump to the bottom and I see, did they change their mind? Is it actually different policy? Did they change the codes? Did they update typos? Did they change the date because ICD-10 got delayed again? So I always check. Those are the 4 sections of a local coverage determination that I think are quite useful. So the national coverage section, the indications and limitations, the coding section, and the revision history. Now, let's go back and search the local coverage determinations. I'm going to start back at ICD Explorer because I just think that's a good way to model the workflow. So I'm in ICD Explorer. I've searched for some code. I see its entire family blown out, and I want to know if there are any local coverage determinations that address this particular diagnostic condition. I get my list, and then I expand my search results here. Now, understanding the structure of the collection is important. The green letters tell you what folder the policy is in. These are set up to reverse date sort themselves, but right now, because of all the revisions of the future ICD-10 local coverage determinations, this sort order has gotten a little bit confusing. It will fix itself on October 1st. But this is the active MRA policy effective October 1, so that's the one that has the I-10 codes in it. This is an archived version of it. This is an archived version of it. Keep going down, keep going down, keep going down. And then I'm probably going to run into the active I-9 version as, oh, well, I'm searching for an N18 code, so I won't. So here's my active LCDs for ESA. And again, as I scroll down, I'm going backwards in time. So just be mindful of whether you're looking at an active or an archived local coverage determination. And if you find that confusing at all, I like that I found a hit here. It's good. I know that there are policies. I can pay attention to the words. And then if I click up here and go to the index, then I can find the MRA policy and click in there from here. So those are a couple of options there. Now, when I code searched, I'm most likely not going to find a national coverage determination unless I get lucky and there's one of those coding rules that have been published in one of those transmittals. So I want to show you the National Coverage Determinations database because I think it's really important as we move to ICD-10. I'll just share this. When we were pulling down the local coverage determinations every week about 3 years ago, most MACs had over 200 local coverage determinations. And then as the MAC jurisdiction map has been reassigned, the number of local coverage determinations per jurisdiction have gone down, sometimes to 40, maybe 80. And so there's a significant reduction in the actual documents available to you to explain what is and is not covered. And so referencing the national coverage determinations right now feels even more important because there may not be a local coverage determination that you're looking for. Okay, so up here, when we go to the LCD search, there's actually a hyperlink right here into the National Coverage Determinations database. And in there, you can click on the first thing, and it's just like that index that we saw for the LCDs. What I like about this is the ability to search by the coverage determination topic. And then I can see the effective date and the updated dates and all the titles in a particular area. Now, some of these national coverage determinations are quite old. So here's a policy that was actually written in 1966 before I was born. And the language may not have changed that much over 50 years, 40 years. So the key words that you are likely to search on to find this determination may not be on this page. So what the doctor calls it today may not be the language that you see on screen. So browsing into the national coverage determinations can be an excellent strategy to find a local coverage determination that kind of is an umbrella and explaining a particular policy that will help you sort of slot what you're looking for underneath it. Now, as I mentioned, there have been a few transmittals where there's this zip file, and then inside the zip file there's a whole bunch of really neat other little files, and they look like this when you open them. So this is the National Coverage Determination for Surgery for Diabetes, and you can go read the indications and limitations of medical necessity. But here are actually showing you what the medical necessity rules look like. And they've got an ICD 9 and 10 diagnosis and a procedures, which is awesome. So when you're keyword searching now in MediRegs, you might find a hit in one of these documents, which will help reveal to you that there is a national coverage determination, but if there's not a coding rules attachment for every NCD yet, so it's not 100%. It's great when you find it, but don't trust it blindly. So my strategy for local coverage determination searching is to start in Code Explorer or start in ICD Explorer, or actually just go to the LCDs tab and go ahead and put in a search term. If you're searching by code, you're likely to find the local coverage determination. If you're searching by keyword, you'll find the national coverage determinations, and then you can get into your content from there. But if you search and you don't find anything, don't stop there. Try keyword searching again, and then maybe browse if you need to, just to make sure you didn't miss anything. Okay. Last thing I want to point out, when I think about medical necessity and the increase that we are expecting to see in denials, even with the relaxation of audits and edits, is the benefit policy manual is really quite important. You'll see citations to it in your local coverage determinations, but someone showed me this, and I see a lot of heads nod when I point it out. there are 2 chapters in Pub 100.02 that are responsible for a number of edits that you might see in your system, even though they're not very well explained. So Chapter 16 explains all the things that are never payable under any circumstances, and may give you a little more detail, like what's a personal comfort item and why is it not payable. And then that's Chapter 16, so there's often these sort of umbrellas under which nothing is payable, and so we don't need to bother having a local coverage determination for it. And then Chapter 15 is a coverage section where CMS has felt it would be useful to provide greater clarification, and you can get into certain sections in there where it really does look like the indications and limitations of medical necessity section, and might explain frequency limits like screening mammographies. It depends on how old the patient is and what her history is. So I find these sections to be very useful. CMS doesn't do a good job of putting codes in Pub 100.02, so keyword searching is a better strategy. Okay, last, let's go to the coding guidance library, and I want to show you some searches in here. Now, we already searched by code coming in from ICD Explorer, but you're not limited to that. You can just come in here and type anything you want in the search box, and you'll be searching all of this content. A lot of it has rich ICD-10 information, even if the title of the collection or folder doesn't say ICD-10 on it. So let's just scroll through here and let me point out a couple of reference materials that you'll find helpful. Your ICD-9 coding clinics are here, and then your ICD-10 coding clinics come next. And during this first year, CMS is not going to be answering a lot of clarifying questions. The American Hospital Association will be. So this is the best reference for reading up on that esoterica. And you can see there's quizzes and Q&A and all kinds of other extra goodies in there. You'll also notice Medicare's frequently asked questions and MLN materials. CMS has been proficient at publishing ICD-10 instructions and guidelines for providers, and you'll find lots of very interesting information in here. In fact, the second folder might look familiar to you if you've been to the cms.gov site. It's an exact copy of their ICD-10 page, or what they put on their left side are these blue links here. If you check out the provider resources page in here, I actually keep this one bookmarked because it updates quite frequently. And if you are looking for implementation guidelines, tips and tricks, how to test your organization, coding basics, and even free educational webinars on ICD-10, you'll find really, really useful information in here. And often in the past 4 years, as I've gone to do an ICD-10 presentation, I start here. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, and some of this content is really quite good. And it's in here that you'll also find the primary source publications of the ICD-10 data set that was published. So if you're looking for the gems because you want to download them yourself without using them in a tool, all of that data is in the public domain. You don't have to buy it separately, and it's all in here. A couple other areas where you're going to see ICD-10 information. The outpatient code editor explains edits that happen in your payer's system on the outpatient side, and there are some diagnosis edits. These are going to contain ICD-9 codes right now, but we'll put the ICD-10 out shortly. And so that might help you discover that you might be getting a return to provider or a denial because you attempted to perform a hysterectomy but the patient is male, or because you tried to do a procedure on a pediatric patient and that's an adult procedure. So there's some nice maps in here. Right now, the provider audits area is keeping up with what the RACs are doing. They're obviously investigating claims that involve ICD-9s, but in a couple of years, we're going to start seeing the ICD-10 issues coming out. You'll see those in here. This collection contains every transmittal, MLN Matters, and SE article ever published by CMS. And in there, you're going to find lots and lots of ICD-10 information. I already showed you benefit policy as well. And then you've got your ICD-10 books. And then we also have ebooks that we make out of the final and proposed rules. And this year for IPPS, that's an important book for you to take a look at. And the final rule will be in the ebook format shortly. We'll talk about that more on the 15th when we do the payment. So let me show you a cool search that I've got set up. When I go to advanced search, I get much more information and availability to do searching than just using the simple search box. On the advanced search screen, I can search for phrases, I can search for dates, and I can connect together up to 3 different searches at the same time. I can target my search to the entire body of the document or just the titles, and I can even target my search to certain content areas. So you can select on or off whatever you want to search for. And here, I'll send you the PowerPoint that shows this, but I would like to find everything published in the guidance library in which ICD-10 actually is in the title of the document. So I did ICD-10 titles only, and I found over 1,000 documents. So if you feel like, gee, I really haven't been keeping up with ICD-10, that might be true. So what I want you to notice is that you can actually store this search. When you do that, MediRegs is going to invite you to set up your own search folders, which you can name whatever you want. I'm going to put this in my Coding 101 folder. You can name your search, and I'll call this ICD-10 Updates, and then you can automate it. So what this is going to do is every week, MediRegs is going to check the what's new for the guidance library, and if there's any new ICD-10 documents, it's going to ship them to me. So if I fail to notice it in my daily alert, MediRegs is going to send it to me again. It's like a little tap on the shoulder. So I'll store that search. I won't ever have to look at this big, long list again. I'll only get the 1 or 2 new documents. And again, let's just peek, see what are some of the things we might have found interesting. So here's 44 CMS FAQs related to ICD-10. Here are all the transmittals that have been published. A lot of those are going to be those NCDs, but there'll also be all sorts of interesting MLN matters and SE articles in here. There's the code books, obviously. Here's some ICD-10 references that have come out from the Medicare Learning Network. Very useful information. Educational tools, PowerPoint presentations, fact sheets. No need for you to build those from scratch. And physician quality. So PQRS, your HCC risk adjustments, your IOCE manual, your MCE manual, those are all shifting from I-9 codes to I-10 codes. You might want to look up those crosswalks. Those are all published in the guidance library as well. Your hospital-acquired conditions are here. So just a really nice tip there. I'm going to pause for a second. I have about 6 minutes left. Christina, do we have any questions that would be something I could demonstrate?
Ray, can you go back to the ICD-10 CM book? And one user has asked about the code range M80, the category M80, M8080. This is a 7-digit code that's going to require 7 digits. And maybe you could just kind of review that structure, if you could just go down to what's bottom there.
So I just want to say what I'm doing on screen because I realized I was doing it without explaining. When you're on a web page, whether it's MediRegs or anywhere else, if you hit Control F, you get this pretty little find box in your browser, and then you can search on screen, and it's going to jump you down the page. Okay, I love MediRegs' handling of this. If you go to your paper book and you look up M80.80, it's going to say don't forget your 7th character. And then in order to figure out which 7th character you need to flip all the way back to the beginning of that section and see that it could be an A, a D, a G, a K, a P, or an S. And then you need to count the letters and get to the 7th character, and so you stick an X in there. So a 7th character specificity means you've got to put it in the 7th space. And if the original code only went to 4 or 5 characters, you got to insert the X's. So the reportable code for other osteoporosis with current pathological fracture unspecified site, you can't bill M80.80. You have to say whether it was the initial encounter for the fracture, which is XA, or the subsequent encounter for the fracture with routine healing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's That's the 7th character specificity, and it's shown here, but I just want to show you, I'll open in another tab. If you were using the ICD Explorer tool, you would get very similar helpfulness. So here's M80. This is the instructions on the category, and then it cuts straight to point 8, and then it cuts straight to point 80, and there you can see the reportable codes clearly marked in bold. Does that answer the question, Christina?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. One other question, Rayon, if you could, in closing, maybe give the users a reminder or some recommendations on how you would tailor your page. Yeah. The specific user that asked the question is the Compliance Suite user.
Okay.
But you could probably speak to it generally.
I can switch screens. Okay. So first off, I just want to show you that if you go to today's daily email alert, so when you log into your MediReg subscription, everyone has alerts on the left. What's new is right there, and you can see what we've posted today. We just updated the diagnosis code book, the 2016 pre-release one, so you can go in there. There's updates on the tools, ICD Explorer's instructions, and the code books. And here's today's webinar is actually listed here in this register table. And we're actually here in this webinar. And if you want my slides, they're right here. And those printable guides are there as well. So if you're a MediReg subscriber, you've got this content. You don't need to ask us for those slides. And they're just, you saw some of them. They're just pretty screenshots of everything that I covered. Okay, so let's talk about tailoring your page. Over on the left, when you go to Special Searches, LCDs, there's a big red banner that says, please, please, please tailor your page now. Or if you go to the Welcome tab, it's the first item under Settings, Tailor Your Page. When you get to this screen, you can uncheck and check anything you like. I tend to turn off the coding archives and just keep guidance for coders on. And then when you scroll down, you're going to see 2 sets of state libraries in those products. The first one is what the MACs are up to. So there's your state contractor libraries. Uncheck all and turn your favorite state back on. And then if you scroll down a little further, you're going to see another set of state libraries if you're in our top-tiered products. That's the regulatory issuances from your state. So it's like the Medi-Cal, it's the Medicaid manuals, it's the admin code and the legislation and the regulations from the state of Colorado. So uncheck and check those, and then pop to the bottom and click Submit. Tailoring your page actually fixes 3 things. Your browse view gets smaller. So now when I scroll down here, instead of seeing 50 states, I only see a few. Your search all gets smaller. So when I search here, I'm not going to search Kansas. And then most importantly, that daily email alert and that local coverage determination search stays narrowed down to your specific geographic region, and you're not going to bother seeing updates in all 50 states, which is really going to make the daily alert much more user-friendly for you. All right, so we're at the top of the hour. I really want to thank you. Custom training is available for customers at any time. If you have a special project that your department is working on and you really want to just do a deep dive into NCCI edits or help us understand how to look at the archives, help us figure out what are the best resources for audit, please reach out to us. Questions and answers are also free on MediReg. So on your Welcome tab, you have a Send Us an Email link. That creates a ticket in our support system. And if you need help, please do reach out. And I've been getting a lot of questions lately about the local coverage determinations. Because of all the moving MACs, it's gotten quite confusing. It should get less confusing shortly. But for now, if you want to be sure you're looking at the right local coverage determination or you want a little help with that, send us an email, type as much detail as you can in the box, and then we'll get back to you really quickly. Thank you for taking this time today, and have a great day.